The younger nuns certainly thought so. She had overheard Sister Claire once talking to Sister Rose. She claims she used to play piano professionally, but have you seen her hands? I doubt she could play chopsticks now. It had hurt, but Sister Margaret couldn't blame them. They had never heard her play, not really. No one here had, except perhaps Sister Dorothy on those rare nights when the pain was manageable. As she prepared for bed, Sister Margaret thought about Sister Dorothy's suggestion. The fundraiser. The idea was absurd, of course, and yet there was a time when music had been her voice, her way of expressing everything she couldn't say in words. Sometimes she missed that voice, especially now when teaching was getting harder, when she felt increasingly set aside as younger, more energetic teachers took her place. Maybe, she whispered to the empty room, just maybe. With that thought, Sister Margaret turned out her light and went to sleep, her dreams filled with the music she once played and the possibility of playing again. The next morning dawned gray and rainy. Sister Margaret woke with stiff joints and the lingering memory of her conversation with Sister Dorothy. The fundraiser idea seemed ridiculous in the harsh light of day. She pushed the thought aside as she prepared for morning prayers. Terrible weather, Sister Rose commented as the nuns gathered in the dining hall for breakfast after Mass. They say the storm might last all weekend. The leak in the school roof will get worse, Sister Claire sighed, pouring coffee. Just what we need when we're already struggling to raise money for repairs. How is the fundraiser planning going? Sister Margaret asked, carefully spreading jam on her toast. Her hands were especially painful this morning. Slow, admitted Sister Claire. We've got the venue, the community center, and some auction items, but we need something special to draw people in. Something to make them open their wallets. She looked meaningfully at Sister Margaret. Something unexpected. Sister Margaret focused on her breakfast, pretending not to understand the hint. Sister Dorothy must have mentioned their late-night conversation. Perhaps Providence will provide, Sister Dorothy said with a small smile. After breakfast, Sister Margaret made her way to the school building, umbrella struggling against the wind. The rain had picked up, drumming against the pavement and turning the convent grounds into a maze of puddles. The day passed slowly. The children were restless because of the rain, confined to indoor recess and distracted by the storm. By afternoon, Sister Margaret's patience was wearing thin. Let's try something different, she announced, setting aside the math lesson. Who knows a song we could all sing together? The suggestion was met with enthusiasm, and soon the classroom was filled with the sounds of "This Little Light of Mine," complete with hand motions that the children performed with much more agility than Sister Margaret could manage. The final bell rang and the children gathered their things. Tommy, the shy boy from the back row, approached her desk. Sister Margaret, he said quietly, my grandma says you used to play piano. Is that true? Sister Margaret was surprised. Yes, that's true. A very long time ago. Could you teach me sometime? He asked, eyes hopeful. My mom says we can't afford lessons, but I really want to learn. Something twisted in Sister Margaret's heart. Let me think about it, Tommy. Perhaps we could arrange something. After the children left, Sister Margaret sat alone in her classroom, looking at the small keyboard in the corner. Tommy's request had stirred something in her, a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. With effort, she stood and walked to the keyboard. It was nothing like a real piano, just a simple electronic instrument with plastic keys. Still, she switched it on and played a few notes, wincing at both the pain in her fingers and the tinny sound. Not quite the same, is it? A voice said from the doorway. Sister Margaret turned to see Principal Walker standing there. In her 50s, with practical clothes and a no-nonsense attitude, the principal rarely visited classrooms after hours. No, not quite, Sister Margaret agreed, switching off the keyboard. I heard you playing, Principal Walker said, coming into the room. Just a few notes, but it was enough. You really were trained, weren't you? Sister Margaret nodded. Before I entered the convent, were you any good? The question was direct, typical of the principal's blunt style. I was, Sister Margaret said simply. There was no pride in the statement, just acknowledgement of fact. Principal Walker studied her for a moment. We're desperate for the fundraiser, you know. The roof, the outdated textbooks, the music program on the chopping block. We need something special. Sister Claire mentioned the same thing. So, will you consider it? Playing something? Sister Margaret shook her head. I appreciate the thought, but no. These hands haven't played properly in decades. She held them up as evidence, the fingers twisted by arthritis. Principal Walker's face softened. Think about it, at least. For the kids? Later that evening, as Sister Margaret walked back to the convent through the rain, she noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside. It was sleek and expensive-looking, out of place in their humble surroundings. "We have a visitor," Sister Rose explained when Sister Margaret entered, shaking water from her umbrella. "His car broke down just up the road. He's waiting for a tow truck, but with this storm it could be hours." In the community room, a man stood by the window watching the rain. He turned as Sister Margaret entered, and she was struck by his presence. Tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and an elegant bearing, he seemed to fill the simple room with his energy. "Sister Margaret, this is Mr. Volkov," Sister Claire said, entering with a tray of tea. "Mr. Volkov, Sister Margaret is our longest-serving teacher." "Anton, please," the man said in a lightly accented voice, extending his hand. "Anton Volkov, thank you for your hospitality." Sister Margaret shook his hand, noticing how he winced slightly at her grip. She'd forgotten how her gnarled hands sometimes surprised people. "Mr. Volkov is a pianist," Sister Claire explained, setting down the tea tray. "He's in town for a charity concert tomorrow night at the River Hall. If the weather permits," Anton said with a rueful smile. "And if my car can be fixed?" Sister Margaret felt a strange flutter in her chest at the word pianist. She accepted a cup of tea from Sister Claire, grateful for something to occupy her hands. "Do you enjoy music, sister?" Anton asked politely as they all sat down. Before Sister Margaret could answer, Sister Claire jumped in. "Oh, Sister Margaret claims she used to play piano before joining the convent." "Isn't that right, sister?" There was a hint of skepticism in her voice that made Sister Margaret bristle inwardly. "Yes, I did," she said simply. "Professionally?" Anton asked with interest. "I was studying to become a concert pianist," Sister Margaret admitted. "But I found a different calling." "She never plays anymore," Sister Claire added. "Her arthritis, you know." She gestured toward Sister Margaret's hands with a look that mingled pity and dismissal. "That must be difficult," Anton said, and something in his tone made Sister Margaret look up. There was no pity in his eyes, only understanding. To have the music inside you but struggle to express it. For a moment, Sister Margaret felt truly seen in a way she hadn't in years. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sister Dorothy and Mother Superior, the head of their small community. Introductions were made again, and the talk turned to the storm, the charity concert, and whether the tow truck would arrive before dinner. "You must stay and eat with us," Mother Superior insisted when Anton mentioned finding a restaurant in town. "It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome to share our meal." "That's very kind," Anton said. "I'd be honored." Dinner that evening was livelier than usual. Anton proved to be a charming guest, telling stories of his travels around the world, performing in grand concert halls and meeting interesting people. The nuns, whose lives were largely confined to the convent and school, listened with rapt attention. "And what brings you to our little town?" Mother Superior asked as they enjoyed Sister Rose's apple pie for dessert. "Surely we're not on the usual concert circuit." "No," Anton agreed with a smile. "But I try to perform for smaller communities when I can. Music shouldn't be only for those in big cities who can afford expensive tickets. Tomorrow's concert is a fundraiser for music education in rural schools," he continued, "something I'm passionate about. Every child deserves the chance to discover if they have musical talent." Sister Margaret thought of Tommy and his request for piano lessons. "Our own school is struggling to maintain its music program," Sister Dorothy mentioned. "In fact, we're having a fundraiser next week for that very purpose, among other needs." "Really?" Anton looked interested. "What sort of program do you have?" "A small one," Principal Walker said. She had also been invited to dinner, as she often was. "One part-time music teacher for the entire school, and instruments that have seen better days. But the children love it. Music is so important," Anton said passionately. "It teaches discipline, creativity, teamwork, skills that benefit every area of life." "Exactly what I always say." Sister Margaret found herself agreeing. Anton turned to her with a smile. "You mentioned you studied piano. Where did you train?" "Oh, just with a local teacher in my hometown," Sister Margaret said, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing fancy." "She's being modest," Sister Dorothy cut in. She was offered a scholarship to Juilliard. The table fell silent. This was news even to Mother Superior, who looked at Sister Margaret with surprise. I didn't know that, she said slowly. It was a long time ago, Sister Margaret said, uncomfortable with the attention, and I declined it. For the convent, Sister Dorothy added. Anton was looking at Sister Margaret with new interest. That's quite a sacrifice, he said softly. Not to me, Sister Margaret replied firmly. I followed my heart. After dinner, the storm continued to rage outside. The tow truck called to say they couldn't make it until morning, and Mother Superior insisted that Anton stay the night in their small guest room. We can't send you out in this weather, she said, and the hotels in town are likely full with stranded travelers. As the nuns began to clear the table, Anton asked if he might use the phone to call the concert organizers. Sister Claire showed him to the office, and the others dispersed to evening duties and prayers. Sister Margaret was heading to her room when she passed the community room and noticed the piano. On impulse, she entered and stood beside it, running her hand lightly over its closed lid. Do you miss it? Anton's voice came from behind her. Sister Margaret turned, startled. I thought you were on the phone. I finished my call, he said, coming into the room. I didn't mean to surprise you. It's all right, she said, stepping away from the piano. You didn't answer my question, Anton said gently. Do you miss it? The piano? Sister Margaret considered deflecting again, but something about this stranger made her want to be honest. Sometimes, she admitted. In quiet moments, Anton gestured to the piano. May I? At her nod, he opened the lid and sat on the bench. His long fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, then began to play. The melody was simple but beautiful. Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of Sister Margaret's favorites. Despite the piano being somewhat out of tune from disuse, the music filled the room with a haunting beauty. Sister Margaret closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. It had been so long since she had heard live music played with such skill. When the final notes faded away, she opened her eyes to find Anton watching her. This is a fine instrument, he said. Needs tuning and some minor repairs, but the tone is excellent. Sister Margaret nodded. It was a gift from a grateful family many years ago. It doesn't get played much anymore. That's a shame, Anton said, closing the lid gently. A piano should be played. Yes, Sister Margaret agreed softly. It should. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two strangers connected by an unspoken understanding of what music meant. Would you play something for me? Anton asked suddenly. Sister Margaret laughed, holding up her hands. These old fingers don't cooperate anymore. I've taught students with physical limitations, Anton said, his voice serious now. There are ways to adapt to work around the pain. I know, Sister Margaret admitted. I've figured out some techniques over the years. Then why not play? Just a little? Sister Margaret hesitated. It had been so long since she had played for anyone but herself. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. Before she could answer, Sister Claire appeared in the doorway. Mother Superior has prepared the guest room, Mr. Volkov, she said. And we'll be having evening prayers soon, Sister Margaret. The moment was broken. Anton thanked Sister Claire and bid Sister Margaret good night. As she prepared for bed that night, Sister Margaret found herself thinking about Anton's question. Why not play? The fundraiser idea that had seemed so absurd that morning now whispered possibilities in her mind. She fell asleep with melodies playing in her dreams, and the faint, unexpected feeling that something important was about to change. Anton Volkov couldn't sleep. The small guest room at the convent was comfortable enough, but his mind kept returning to Sister Margaret and her hands. Those twisted, arthritic fingers had once danced across piano keys. He wondered what she had sounded like in her prime. The storm outside had quieted to a gentle rain, tapping against his window like soft fingers on a keyboard. Anton checked his watch just past midnight. He should try to sleep. Tomorrow would be busy with the car repairs and final preparations for his concert. Still restless, he got up and pulled on his sweater over his t-shirt and pants. Perhaps a short walk would clear his mind. He quietly opened his door and stepped into the dark hallway. The convent was silent except for the occasional creak of the old building settling. Anton moved carefully, not wanting to wake anyone. He wasn't entirely sure where he was going, just following his feet through the unfamiliar corridors. Eventually, he found himself near what he thought was the community room where the piano stood. But as he approached, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. The faint sound of music. Someone was playing the piano. Very softly, as if trying not to be heard, but with unmistakable skill. The piece was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most challenging works in the piano repertoire, and one Anton himself performed regularly. He moved closer, staying in the shadows of the hallway. The community room door was partially open, allowing a sliver of moonlight to spill out. Through the crack, Anton could see Sister Margaret seated at the piano. Her eyes were closed, her face serene in concentration. Her gnarled hands moved awkwardly across the keys, clearly causing her pain. Yet the music that emerged was extraordinary. She wasn't playing at full tempo or with perfect technique. Her arthritis made that impossible. But the emotion and understanding in her interpretation were profound. Anton stood transfixed. This was not the playing of someone who used to play a little, as Sister Claire had dismissively suggested. This was the playing of a true artist. As he watched, he noticed how Sister Margaret had adapted her technique to work around her physical limitations. She used unusual fingerings, occasionally crossing hands in ways that weren't traditional, but allowed her to reach notes her stiff fingers couldn't otherwise manage. It was ingenious and moving, a testament to her determination and love of the music. The piece built to its climactic section, and Sister Margaret's face reflected every emotional nuance of the music. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't stop playing. If anything, the emotion seemed to fuel her performance. Anton found himself holding his breath. He knew he was witnessing something deeply private, almost sacred. He should leave, give her this moment of solitude. But he couldn't tear himself away from the beauty of what he was hearing. As the final notes faded, Sister Margaret sat motionless, her hands resting on the keys, her eyes still closed. Then she sighed deeply and whispered, "That was for you, Mother." The intimate moment made Anton feel even more like an intruder. He began to back away quietly, but the old wooden floor betrayed him with a loud creak. Sister Margaret's eyes flew open. "Who's there?" she called, her voice suddenly tense. Anton had no choice but to step forward. "I'm sorry," he said softly, pushing the door open wider. "I didn't mean to spy. I couldn't sleep and was walking, and then I heard—" Sister Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't think anyone was awake. Please," he said, entering the room fully now. "Call me Anton. And please don't be embarrassed. What I just heard was beautiful." Sister Margaret shook her head, closing the piano lid with trembling hands. It was nothing. Just an old woman remembering. It was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, played with more heart than many professional pianists manage. Anton said firmly, sitting in a chair near the piano. "That's not nothing." Sister Margaret looked down at her hands. "I haven't played that piece in front of anyone since before I entered the convent." "Who is Mother?" Anton asked gently. "You said something after you finished playing." Sister Margaret looked surprised, then gave a small, sad smile. "My mother. She was the one who first noticed my interest in music. Worked extra shifts to buy a used piano. Drove me to lessons every week. She must have been proud of your talent." "She was." Sister Margaret nodded. "She died just before I decided to enter the convent. Cancer. The last time I played that piece in public, she was in the front row." "I'm sorry," Anton said sincerely. Sister Margaret shrugged slightly. "It was a long time ago, but sometimes when I play that piece, I feel like she can hear me." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. "How long have you been playing in secret like this?" Anton finally asked. Sister Margaret looked slightly guilty. "On and off for years. Only when the pain isn't too bad, and only when everyone is asleep. The walls here are thick, thankfully. But why in secret? Surely no one would mind." Sister Margaret sighed. "It's complicated. When I first joined the convent, there were stricter views about such things. My piano playing was seen as a worldly attachment, something to be set aside. And now it's different, of course. But habits form, and then there's this." She held up her twisted hands. "People assume I can't play anymore. It's easier to let them think that than to explain why I only play sometimes, or why I can't play the way I used to." Anton nodded in understanding. "You've developed quite remarkable adaptive techniques." "Out of necessity," Sister Margaret said with a small smile. "You learn to work with what you have. Your phrasing in the second movement was unlike any interpretation I've heard. Anton said. Almost as if you were singing through the piano. Sister Margaret's eyes lit up. That's exactly what I was trying to do. My old teacher always said that a pianist should be able to make the instrument sing. For the next hour, they talked about music, composers they loved, performances they remembered, technical challenges they'd overcome. Sister Margaret spoke with knowledge and passion that had been bottled up for decades, finally finding an outlet with someone who understood. I can't believe the time, she said eventually, noticing a clock on the wall. It's nearly 2 a.m. Time disappears when musicians talk, Anton smiled. But you're right, we should try to get some sleep. He hesitated, then added, Would you consider playing something at my concert tomorrow night? Sister Margaret's smile vanished. What? No, I couldn't possibly. Why not? What I heard tonight deserves an audience. I'm not ready for that, she said firmly. It's been 50 years since I performed properly. And my hands, some nights are better than others. Tonight was a good night, but tomorrow might not be. Anton nodded, respecting her decision. I understand. But what about your school's fundraiser? Sister Dorothy mentioned it's next week. That would give you time to prepare. Sister Margaret stood up, shaking her head. Mr. Volkov, Anton, I appreciate your encouragement, but I'm not a performer anymore. I'm a teacher, a nun. What you heard tonight was private. Something I do for myself, for my mother's memory. Not for applause. Music isn't meant to be kept private, Anton said gently. It's meant to be shared. To touch hearts. To inspire. Isn't that what you tell your students? Sister Margaret had no answer for that. Think about it, Anton said, standing as well. That's all I ask. The next morning at breakfast, there was no mention of their late-night conversation. Sister Margaret was quiet, avoiding Anton's eyes across the table. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean sky and puddles that reflected the morning sunlight. Good news, Sister Claire announced. The tow truck should be here within the hour, Mr. Volkov. Thank you, Anton said. You've all been so kind. I'm grateful for the storm that brought me to your doorstep. Will you still be able to perform tonight? Mother Superior asked. After all this disruption? Absolutely, Anton assured her. The car issue is minor according to the mechanic, and the concert hall confirmed everything is on schedule. Several of us are planning to attend, Sister Dorothy said. The school has purchased tickets as part of our cultural education program. Wonderful. Anton looked pleased. I'll be sure to acknowledge St. Catherine's from the stage. And perhaps, he glanced at Sister Margaret, perhaps some of you might even join me on stage? Sister Margaret nearly choked on her tea. What do you mean? Sister Claire asked, intrigued. I sometimes invite local musicians to play a piece with me, Anton explained smoothly. It creates a nice connection with the community. But none of us are musicians, Sister Rose said. I believe Sister Margaret is, Anton said quietly. All eyes turned to Sister Margaret, who was staring at Anton with a mixture of shock and betrayal. Sister Margaret hasn't played in years, Sister Claire said dismissively. Her arthritis, you know. Actually, Sister Dorothy said thoughtfully, I've sometimes heard music late at night. Very faint. I thought it might be a radio somewhere. Sister Margaret's cheeks burned. It was nothing, just remembering old skills. Sister Margaret is being modest, Anton said. She's a gifted pianist. Is this true? Mother Superior asked, looking at Sister Margaret with surprise. Before Sister Margaret could respond, the office phone rang. Sister Claire went to answer it and returned moments later. The tow truck is here, she announced. The interruption gave Sister Margaret a reprieve from the uncomfortable conversation. As everyone rose to see Anton off, she slipped away to her classroom, claiming she needed to prepare for the day's lessons. But Tommy was already waiting at her door when she arrived. Did you think about it, Sister Margaret? He asked eagerly. About the piano lessons? Sister Margaret looked at the hopeful face before her and felt something shift inside. This child wanted what she had been given as a child, the gift of music. Yes, Tommy, she said softly. I've thought about it. Later that morning, as Sister Margaret was teaching fractions to her third graders, there was a knock at the classroom door. Principal Walker entered, followed by Anton, who was carrying a small package. I'm sorry to interrupt, Principal Walker said, but Mr. Volkov wanted to say goodbye before he left. The children stared curiously at the tall stranger. Thank you all for your hospitality, Anton said warmly. Sister Margaret, might I have a word in private? Sister Margaret asked her students to work on their practice problems and stepped into the hallway with Anton. I wanted to apologize, he said immediately. I shouldn't have put you on the spot at breakfast. No, you shouldn't have, she agreed, but without anger. I brought you something. Anton held out the package. A peace offering. Sister Margaret unwrapped it to find a CD. Your recordings, she said, reading the cover. And this, Anton pulled an envelope from his pocket. 2 tickets to tonight's concert. For you and Tommy. Sister Margaret looked up in surprise. How did you know about Tommy? I overheard him asking you yesterday, Anton admitted, and I saw him waiting for you this morning. Sister Margaret was touched by the gesture. Thank you, but the second row is reserved for you, Anton continued. No pressure to play, I promise. Just come and enjoy the music. He hesitated, then added, and if you change your mind about the fundraiser next week, call this number. He handed her a business card. My manager can arrange everything. Before Sister Margaret could respond, the car repair service pulled up outside. Anton had to leave. Think about it, he said again as he walked away. Music is a gift meant to be shared. Sister Margaret watched him go, the CD clutched in her hands, and felt as if she were standing at a crossroads. After 50 years of keeping her music private, of adapting to her limitations, of setting aside that part of herself, could she really step back into the spotlight? And more importantly, did she want to? The rest of the school day passed in a blur for Sister Margaret. She found herself distracted during lessons, her mind wandering to Anton's invitation and the 2 concert tickets tucked safely in her desk drawer. She hadn't yet decided whether to attend, let alone whether to consider his wild suggestion about playing at the school fundraiser. When the final bell rang, Tommy lingered behind as the other children rushed out. Sister Margaret, he asked hesitantly, did you decide about the piano lessons? Sister Margaret looked at the boy's hopeful face and nodded. Yes, Tommy, I think we can arrange something. Perhaps during lunch breaks once a week to start. Tommy's face lit up with a smile so bright it warmed Sister Margaret's heart. Really, thank you. When can we start? Next Monday, she decided. Bring your lunch to the classroom and we'll use the keyboard here. I'll practice really hard, I promise, Tommy said earnestly. My grandma says that's the most important thing. Your grandma is right, Sister Margaret agreed. But do you know what else is important? Tommy shook his head. Joy, she said simply, finding joy in the music even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. After Tommy left, Sister Margaret remained in her empty classroom, thinking about her own words. When was the last time she had allowed herself to feel true joy in her music without guilt or secrecy? She walked to the small keyboard and switched it on, playing a simple C major scale. The plastic keys felt nothing like a real piano, and the tinny sound was a poor substitute for the rich tones of the convent's grand piano. But it would be enough for teaching Tommy the basics. On impulse, she played the opening of Bach's Prelude in C major, one of the first classical pieces she had mastered as a child. Despite the keyboard's limitations and the stiffness in her fingers, the familiar melody brought a smile to her face. That sounds nice, said a voice from the doorway. Sister Margaret turned to see Principal Walker standing there. Just checking the keyboard before I start giving Tommy lessons, she explained. Principal Walker came into the room. So you've decided to teach him? That's wonderful. It seems the right thing to do, Sister Margaret said, switching off the keyboard. He has a genuine interest. And what about you? Have you decided about the fundraiser? Sister Margaret sighed. Word travels fast around here. Sister Claire mentioned that your famous guest suggested you might play, Principal Walker said, pulling up a child-sized chair and sitting down. The sight of the dignified principal perched on a tiny seat would have made Sister Margaret laugh under different circumstances. It was just talk, Sister Margaret said dismissively. I'm not a performer anymore. But you could be, Principal Walker pressed gently. Just one piece. It would be so meaningful for the children to see their teacher sharing her talent. I'm not sure my fingers are up to it, Sister Margaret hedged, flexing her hands unconsciously. Principal Walker studied her for a moment. Is it really your fingers you're worried about? Or is it something else? The question caught Sister Margaret off guard. What do you mean? I wonder if you're afraid, Principal Walker said carefully. Not of playing poorly, but of playing well. That doesn't make any sense, Sister Margaret protested, doesn't it? If you play and it's not good, Well, everyone will say, poor Sister Margaret. Her arthritis has taken her talent. But if you play and it's beautiful? Principal Walker let the thought hang in the air. Then what? Sister Margaret asked, feeling strangely defensive. Then you have to reconcile the person you've been for 50 years with the person you might have been. Principal Walker stood up. That's a lot to face at 78. The principal's insight was uncomfortably accurate. Sister Margaret had never thought of it that way, but there was truth in the words. Part of her was afraid of playing well, of stirring up old questions about choices made long ago, paths not taken. I should go, Principal Walker said, moving toward the door. But consider this. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our students is showing them that it's never too late to embrace who you truly are. After the principal left, Sister Margaret sat alone in the quiet classroom, turning the conversation over in her mind. She reached for her bag and pulled out the concert tickets Anton had given her. The performance was just a few hours away. Making a decision, she walked to the office and used the school phone to call Tommy's home. His grandmother answered, and Sister Margaret explained about the concert tickets. The woman was delighted, promising to have Tommy ready when Sister Margaret came by to pick him up. Next, she called Sister Dorothy at the convent to let her know she wouldn't be at evening prayers. I'm taking one of my students to the concert, she explained. Anton Volkov's concert? Sister Dorothy asked. Several of us are attending too. We can all go together. That would be lovely, Sister Margaret agreed, relieved not to have to drive in the dark alone. That evening, Sister Margaret found herself sitting in the second row of River Hall with Tommy on one side and Sister Dorothy on the other. Several other nuns were seated nearby, along with Principal Walker and a few teachers from St. Catherine's. The concert hall wasn't large by city standards, but it was the grandest venue in their small town, with plush red seats and decent acoustics. Tonight it was nearly full. The audience, a mix of locals and visitors from neighboring towns. When Anton walked onto the stage in his tuxedo, the audience applauded enthusiastically. He bowed gracefully, then moved to the piano. As he sat down, his eyes scanned the front rows and he smiled slightly when he spotted Sister Margaret. Good evening, he said into the microphone set up near the piano. I'm delighted to be here in your beautiful town. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the Sisters of St. Catherine's Convent for their kindness when my car broke down in yesterday's storm. Their hospitality reminded me that sometimes unexpected detours bring the greatest blessings. He looked directly at Sister Margaret as he said this, giving her a small nod of acknowledgement. Then he began to play. His first piece was Mozart, light, joyful, and precise. Tommy watched with wide eyes, his small body tense with concentration. Sister Margaret found herself watching the boy as much as Anton, recognizing in his rapt expression her own childhood fascination with the piano. As the concert progressed, Anton moved to more complex pieces, Beethoven, Liszt, and finally Chopin. When he announced the Ballad No. 1 in G minor, Sister Margaret felt a jolt of recognition. The same piece she had played in the night. Anton's interpretation was masterful, his technical skill flawless. Yet as Sister Margaret listened, she found herself mentally making different choices, lingering longer on certain phrases, bringing out inner voices that Anton had chosen to subdue, feeling the music in ways slightly different from his approach. For the first time in decades, she was listening not just as an appreciative audience member but as a fellow artist with her own valid interpretations. When the piece ended, the audience erupted in applause. Anton took his bows, then held up his hands for quiet. For my final piece tonight, I'd like to play something special, he announced. Music is a universal language, but it speaks to each of us in personal ways. Yesterday I was reminded that sometimes the most profound musical experiences happen not in concert halls, but in quiet rooms where someone plays purely for the love of the music. His eyes found Sister Margaret's again, and she felt a flutter of anxiety. Surely he wouldn't call her out publicly, but Anton simply turned back to the piano. This is Debussy's Clair de Lune, dedicated to those who make music in the moonlight. The gentle, evocative piece washed over the audience. Sister Margaret closed her eyes, remembering how Anton had played it on the convent piano. When the final notes faded away, there was a moment of hushed silence before the applause began. After several curtain calls, the concert ended. People began filing out, chatting enthusiastically about the performance. "Can we go say hello to him?" Tommy asked eagerly. "I'm not sure if—" Sister Margaret began, but she was interrupted by an usher approaching their row. "Sister Margaret?" Mr. Volkov asked if you and your party would join him backstage. Tommy's face lit up with excitement. Sister Dorothy gave Sister Margaret an encouraging nod, and so they followed the usher through a side door and down a narrow hallway to a small room serving as the green room. Anton was still in his performance clothes, his face flushed with the exertion and emotion of the concert. When they entered, he came forward with a warm smile. "You came," he said to Sister Margaret. "I'm so glad." "It was a wonderful performance," she said sincerely. "This is Tommy," she added, placing her hand on the boy's shoulder. "One of my students. He's interested in learning piano." Anton crouched down to be at eye level with Tommy. "Is that so? And what did you think of the concert, Tommy?" "It was amazing," the boy breathed. "Especially the fast parts. How do your fingers move so quick?" Anton laughed. "Many years of practice. Hours and hours every day." "Sister Margaret is going to teach me," Tommy said proudly. "Then you're very fortunate," Anton told him seriously. "She's a fine pianist." "Really?" Tommy looked up at Sister Margaret with new respect. "Really?" Anton confirmed. "In fact?" He glanced at Sister Margaret, as if seeking permission to continue. She gave a small nod, curious about what he would say. "Sister Margaret could be playing concerts like this if she wanted to," Anton told Tommy. "She has a special gift." Tommy's eyes widened. "Will you play at our school fundraiser, please? Then everyone would know how good you are." Sister Margaret was caught off guard by the direct question. I haven't decided yet," she said honestly. Principal Walker, who had joined them backstage, stepped forward. "It would mean so much to the children, Sister Margaret, and it would certainly help ticket sales." "I was thinking," Anton said carefully, "that perhaps we could play something together. A duet." Sister Margaret stared at him. "A duet? But I haven't—" "We could rehearse tomorrow," Anton continued. "My next concert isn't until Tuesday in the city. I could delay my departure, help you prepare." "I couldn't ask you to do that," Sister Margaret protested. "You didn't ask." "I offered," Anton smiled. "Besides, I'm curious to work with you. Your approach to Chopin last night was intriguing." Sister Dorothy, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "It seems Providence is providing an opportunity." Sister Margaret looked around at the faces watching her expectantly. Anton's encouraging smile, Tommy's excitement, Principal Walker's hope, Sister Dorothy's gentle understanding. Something shifted inside her. A door long closed beginning to open. "What piece did you have in mind?" she asked Anton. His smile widened. "I have several ideas. We can discuss them tomorrow. Shall we say 9 o'clock at the convent?" And just like that, Sister Margaret found herself agreeing to a plan that 24 hours ago would have seemed utterly impossible. As they left the concert hall, Tommy chattering excitedly beside her about meeting a real concert pianist, Sister Margaret felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. After 50 years of hiding her music in the darkness, she had committed to stepping into the light. "Are you all right?" Sister Dorothy asked quietly as they walked to the car. "You've gone very pale." "I'm not sure what I've just agreed to," Sister Margaret confessed. "My hands, some days they barely work at all." "Then you'll play on the good days and rest on the bad ones," Sister Dorothy said practically. "But I think this is about more than your hands, isn't it?" Sister Margaret nodded slowly. "For so long my music has been private, just for me. The thought of sharing it again, of being judged or praised," Sister Dorothy pointed out. "That might be even harder," Sister Margaret admitted. Thinking of Principal Walker's insight, Sister Dorothy patted her arm gently. "Whatever happens, remember that your worth isn't tied to how well you play." It never was. Those words stayed with Sister Margaret through the drive home, through the flurry of dropping Tommy off and returning to the quiet convent. As she prepared for bed, she found herself looking at her hands, really looking at them. The knuckles swollen and bent, the skin thin and spotted with age, yet still capable of creating beauty. Tomorrow she would begin a journey she never expected to take. At 78 years old, Sister Margaret was about to become a performer again. Not the performer she once was, but perhaps something new, something true to who she had become. As she drifted off to sleep, she whispered a short prayer. Give me courage, Lord, and let there be joy in the music. The week leading up to the fundraiser passed in a whirlwind for Sister Margaret. Each morning, Anton arrived at the convent to rehearse with her. They had settled on a piece that would showcase both her emotional depth and work around her physical limitations. A special arrangement of Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, that would begin with Sister Margaret playing solo, then transition into a duet when Anton joined in. Word had spread quickly about the upcoming performance. The local newspaper ran a story with the headline, Concert Pianist to Perform with 78-year-old Nun at St. Catherine's Fundraiser. Sister Margaret found the attention uncomfortable, but Principal Walker was delighted by the ticket sales. We've sold out completely, she announced 3 days before the event, and we've had to move to the community center's main hall to fit everyone. So many people, Sister Margaret murmured, feeling a flutter of panic. Perhaps this wasn't such a good idea. It's a wonderful idea, Anton assured her during their rehearsal that afternoon. Your playing is beautiful, Sister Margaret. The world deserves to hear it. They were working in the community room where the convent's grand piano had been tuned and adjusted for the first time in years. Anton had arranged for a piano technician to visit, insisting it was a donation to the school. Let's try the transition again, he suggested. Remember, don't rush here, give the phrase room to breathe. Sister Margaret nodded and began to play. Her arthritis was particularly painful today, making some passages difficult, but she had learned to adapt, to find alternate fingerings when necessary. Anton watched her hands with professional interest, occasionally suggesting a different approach to a challenging section. That's it. He nodded approvingly as she completed a difficult run. Beautiful phrasing. During these sessions, Sister Margaret had come to appreciate Anton not just as a performer, but as a teacher. He was patient yet demanding, pushing her just enough without causing frustration. Under his guidance, she found herself playing better than she had in years. You might have had a career teaching master classes, she told him during a break. You have a gift for it. Anton smiled, pleased by the compliment. Perhaps in my next career. For now, I'm content with performing and the occasional special student. He looked at her meaningfully. Which reminds me, how are Tommy's lessons coming along? Sister Margaret smiled. He's enthusiastic, if not yet disciplined. But there's potential there. Real potential. The piano lessons with Tommy had quickly become the highlight of her week. His genuine excitement about music reminded her of herself at his age. She'd even arranged for him to practice on the convent piano twice a week after school, under her supervision. You're changing his life, you know, Anton said quietly. The gift of music. It stays with a person forever, even if they never become professional. Sister Margaret nodded, thinking of her own life and how music had remained her private joy through decades of teaching and prayer. I know. The day before the fundraiser, Sister Margaret woke with a sense of dread. Her hands were worse than usual, stiff and throbbing. She could barely button her own clothing. During breakfast, Sister Rose noticed her struggling with her teacup. Are you all right, Sister Margaret? Your hands seem worse today. Just the weather changing, Sister Margaret said, trying to sound unconcerned. But inside she was worried. How could she possibly play tomorrow if her hands were in this condition? When Anton arrived for their final rehearsal, she had to tell him the truth. I don't think I can do this, she admitted, showing him her swollen fingers. I can barely move them today. Anton's face showed concern but not surprise. I thought this might happen. Performance anxiety often manifests physically, especially when we're out of practice with performing. This isn't anxiety, Sister Margaret protested. It's arthritis. Perhaps both, Anton suggested gently. The mind and body are connected after all. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small jar. My mother had arthritis too. This helped her sometimes. It's just a cream with some anti-inflammatory properties, may I? After Sister Margaret nodded, he carefully applied the cream to her hands, his touch professional but kind as he worked it into her joints with gentle pressure. Now let's try some gentle stretches, he said, demonstrating movements for her to copy. Nothing forceful, just easy movements to increase circulation. After 20 minutes of this treatment, Sister Margaret had to admit her hands felt somewhat better. Not perfect, but more manageable. Let's try playing very gently. Anton suggested, just to keep the piece in your muscle memory. They worked for an hour at a slower tempo than usual. By the end, Sister Margaret felt more confident. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Will you bring that cream tomorrow?" "Of course," Anton promised. "And remember, if needed, I can adjust the arrangement further. The music serves the musician, not the other way around." That night, Sister Margaret slept poorly, her mind filled with worries about the performance. What if her hand seized up completely? What if she embarrassed herself in front of the whole town? What if people laughed? "You're being ridiculous," she told herself firmly in the darkness. "You're 78 years old. Who cares what people think?" But she did care, she realized. Not about impressing people, but about doing justice to the music, about honoring the gift she had been given. The morning of the fundraiser dawned clear and cool. Sister Margaret spent extra time in prayer, asking not for perfect performance, but for the strength to share her music with an open heart, whatever the outcome. Sister Dorothy knocked on her door mid-morning. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Sister Margaret admitted with a small laugh. "But ready, I think." "The whole convent will be there to support you," Sister Dorothy assured her. Even Sister Clare is excited, though she'd never admit it. The fundraiser was scheduled to begin at 3 in the afternoon. In addition to the musical performance, there would be an auction of donated items, refreshments, and presentations about the school's programs needing financial support. Sister Margaret arrived early with the other nuns. The community center had been transformed with flowers and decorations in the school colors. A grand piano, rented for the occasion, stood on the small stage at the front of the hall. Principal Walker hurried over when she spotted Sister Margaret. "There you are. How are you feeling?" "Anton is already in the back room warming up." "I'm fine," Sister Margaret said, though her stomach was churning with nerves. She made her way to the back room, where Anton was playing scales at a small upright piano. He looked up with a warm smile when she entered. "Ah, there's my duet partner. Let me see those hands." Sister Margaret held them out. They were stiff, but not as bad as yesterday. "Let's do our routine," Anton said, taking out the cream. As he worked on her hands, he talked soothingly about the upcoming performance. The excellent piano on stage, the supportive audience, anything to keep her mind off her nerves. By the time Principal Walker came to tell them they would be on in 15 minutes, Sister Margaret felt as ready as she would ever be. "Remember," Anton said as they prepared to go on stage, "this is about joy. The joy of music. Nothing else matters," Sister Margaret nodded, those words resonating with what she had told Tommy about finding joy in the music. The fundraiser began with Principal Walker's welcome speech, followed by a short performance from the school choir. Then it was time for the main event. "Ladies and gentlemen," Principal Walker announced, "we have a very special treat today. Internationally acclaimed pianist Anton Volkov will perform, accompanied by our own Sister Margaret Donovan, who taught many of you, or your children, over her 50 years at St. Catherine's. What many of you may not know is that before Sister Margaret joined the convent, she was an accomplished pianist herself. Today they will perform a special arrangement of Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring." The audience applauded as Sister Margaret and Anton walked onto the stage. Sister Margaret spotted Tommy in the front row, sitting with his grandmother. Several rows were filled with her current and former students, and all the nuns from St. Catherine's were seated together, even Mother Superior, who rarely left the convent these days. Sister Margaret sat at the piano, Anton standing nearby. The hall fell silent. She placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were hesitant, her fingers stiff and uncertain. But as she continued, something remarkable happened. The music began to flow through her, warming her joints, easing the pain. She forgot about the audience, forgot about her anxiety, and simply played from her heart. The arrangement began simply, with a clear statement of the melody that even her arthritic hands could manage. As the piece progressed, it grew more complex, building toward the moment when Anton would join her. When that moment came, he sat beside her on the bench, their shoulders nearly touching. His hands took over the complex running passages while hers carried the melody. Together they created something neither could have achieved alone, her emotional depth complemented by his technical brilliance. The audience sat spellbound. Many had come out of curiosity or to support the school, not expecting to be moved to tears by an elderly nun playing the piano. But there wasn't a dry eye in the hall when the final notes faded away. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the audience erupted in applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Sister Margaret sat stunned, overwhelmed by the response and by the experience of playing publicly again after so many decades. Anton took her hand and helped her to her feet, and together they bowed to the audience. As the applause continued, Sister Margaret spotted Tommy jumping up and down in excitement. Sister Dorothy was wiping away tears, and even Sister Claire looked impressed. But what touched her most was the expression on Mother Superior's face, a look of profound respect and understanding. Principal Walker came to the microphone as the applause finally died down. "I think we can all agree that was something special. Thank you, Sister Margaret and Mr. Volkov." Then she made an unexpected announcement. "I'm pleased to tell you that Mr. Volkov has made a generous donation to establish a music scholarship at St. Catherine's, the Sister Margaret Donovan Music. Scholarship will provide piano lessons to students who show interest and aptitude but lack financial resources, Sister." Margaret turned to Anton in surprise. He smiled and shrugged. "Every child deserves the chance to discover if they have a gift," he said softly. "Like your mother did for you." The fundraiser concluded with the auction, which raised more money than any previous school event. But the talk of the afternoon was Sister Margaret's performance. People who had known her for decades saw her in a new light, and former students approached her with awe and new respect. "I had no idea. Sister Margaret," one middle-aged woman said, taking her hands gently. "You taught me 30 years ago, and I never knew you could play like that. Why did you keep it a secret for so long?" asked another. Sister Margaret had no simple answer to that question. How could she explain the complex interplay of duty, humility, and fear that had kept her music private? How her dedication to her vocation had seemed at the time to require setting aside her musical ambitions. In the days that followed, Sister Margaret's life changed in unexpected ways. The local music school offered her a position teaching advanced students. The newspaper ran a feature story about her life and her decision to enter the convent at the height of her musical promise. Anton's recording company even approached her about making a CD, Music for Evening Prayer, featuring her playing contemplative pieces. But the most meaningful change was simpler and more personal. Each day after school, Sister Margaret now had a small group of students, Tommy and 3 others, who came to the convent to learn piano. The Sister Margaret Donovan Music Scholarship covered their lessons and practice time, and in the evenings, the convent's grand piano was no longer silent. Sister Margaret played regularly now, sometimes for the other nuns, sometimes for visitors, but most often simply for the joy of it. Her arthritis still troubled her, some days worse than others, but she had learned to work with it rather than fight against it. A month after the fundraiser, Sister Margaret received a package from Anton, who was now on tour in Europe. Inside was a CD of his latest concert and a note that read, "Music shared is twice blessed. It blesses those who hear it and those who make it. Never stop playing, my friend. The world needs your voice." Sister Margaret placed the note on her piano, a reminder that it's never too late to share your gifts with the world. At 78, she had finally found the courage to step out of the shadows and into the light. And in doing so, she had discovered that the joy of music, like all true gifts, grows stronger when shared.